The fuel rail pressure sensor is employed in common rail diesel and direct injection gasoline engines. Its primary purpose is to inform the powertrain control module of the fuel pressure inside the fuel rail. Since the fuel rail pressure sensor is used on returnless fuel systems, it directly impacts the amount of fuel going into the combustion chambers. Naturally, when the sensor starts failing, it severely throws off the air-fuel ratio, which leads to a number of different symptoms, such as difficulty starting the engine, poor performance, poor fuel economy, and more. Hey there! I hope you're all doing fantastic, and hopefully this video gives you the valuable insights you're looking for. Let's dive right in. The fuel rail is under extremely high pressure, and the sensor's role is to help regulate the predetermined pressure by signaling the powertrain control module when there's a drop or spike in fuel pressure. The fuel management maps in the powertrain control module then guide the direct injection high-pressure pump to increase or decrease output, restoring the required rail pressure while adjusting the injector pulse width accordingly. This constant communication occurs thousands of times per second to ensure precise fuel injection into the cylinders, maintaining both economy and emissions. Functioning as a diaphragm strain gauge device, the fuel rail pressure sensor undergoes resistance changes with pressure. This altered resistance affects the voltage drop across the sensor terminals, generating an electrical signal corresponding to pressure for the powertrain control module. The symptoms of a bad fuel rail pressure sensor are the same ones that can come from other faulty sensors that affect the air-fuel ratio. Those include the oxygen sensor, mass airflow sensor, and coolant temperature sensor, to name a few. That's why a professional diagnosis is necessary if you suspect the fuel rail pressure sensor is bad. That is, unless you get a check engine light with corresponding fault codes, which we will mention a bit later. Symptom number 1. Difficulty starting the engine. In cold weather, a malfunctioning fuel pressure sensor can lead to difficulty starting the engine. When the sensor inaccurately signals higher fuel pressure to the engine control unit, the engine control unit won't instruct the fuel pump to deliver sufficient fuel for the required richer air-fuel mixture during cold starts. This results in noticeably longer cranking before the engine fires up. In extreme cases, it might even take a few attempts to start the engine. Symptom number 2. Black exhaust smoke. One of the more obvious symptoms of a malfunctioning fuel pressure sensor is the presence of black exhaust smoke, primarily observable in diesel engine vehicles. Diesel fuel, being inherently greasy, tends to produce a lot more smoke. When the fuel pressure sensor provides inaccurate information to the engine control unit, causing the air-fuel ratio to become excessively rich, a significant amount of the unburnt diesel transforms into dense black smoke. Some black smoke can happen in gasoline engines, but it's usually barely noticeable. Symptom number 3. Frequent stalling. As the fuel pressure sensor directly interferes with the fuel pressure, it can cause it to drop too low or increase too much. A drop in fuel pressure results in a brief surge in idle speed, followed by a decrease, ultimately causing the engine to stall due to a severely lean air-fuel ratio. Conversely, if the fuel pressure increases excessively, the ratio becomes too rich, causing the idle speed to slowly die down before the engine gradually stalls. During these events, the engine will be misfiring and shaking. Stalling can occur during various scenarios, such as right after starting the engine on a cold morning, coming to a stop at a red light, or in extreme cases when shifting gears. Symptom number 4. Check engine light. A check engine light is fairly common with a bad fuel rail pressure sensor. The engine control unit may trigger a P0187 code if the fuel pump output is increased, but the sensor signal remains constant, indicating low fuel pressure. Likewise, a P0088 code may appear if the pump output decreases without a change in the sensor signal, indicating high fuel pressure. Other fault codes like P0190 to P0194 indicate specific sensor circuit issues. Regardless, replacing the sensor is typically necessary to resolve these problems. Symptom number 5. Poor performance. The air-fuel ratio is one of the main things that determines how efficiently an engine runs. Different driving conditions require varying ratios, but with a faulty fuel pressure sensor, the ratio will almost never be right. A lean ratio, caused by insufficient fuel in the cylinders, reduces thermal efficiency and performance. On the other hand, a rich ratio, where there's excessive fuel, makes ignition more difficult due to inadequate oxygen and poor fuel atomization. This delay in ignition essentially retards the timing, directly impacting performance. Symptom number 6. Increased fuel consumption. Any problem affecting the engine's thermal efficiency will also impact fuel economy. Just how much the fuel consumption will increase depends on the severity of the fault. In the case of a malfunctioning fuel rail pressure sensor, the increase can range from 5 to 30, as both rich and lean air fuel ratios substantially increase fuel consumption. Cost to replace a fuel rail pressure sensor. The cost of replacing a fuel rail pressure sensor varies based on the car type. Replacement sensors range from $50 to over $350, with an average price around $100. OEM sensors are $20-50, more expensive, but high-quality replacements are generally reliable. Labor costs fluctuate depending on sensor accessibility, taking 10-15 minutes for some cars and over an hour for others. Labor expenses typically range from $50 to $150, with an average of $100. Consequently, the total cost for a fuel rail pressure sensor replacement, including parts and labor, averages around $200. Replacement can halve the cost if the sensor is easily accessible. You can find a step-by-step video in the description.